Let's turn to domestic news now. Prominent U.S. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin was in Alberta this week. He toured the oil sands and touted the importance of North American energy independence. Jason Kenney is the Premier of Alberta. He joins us now from Calgary. Premier, good to see you. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, Vashi.
When Joe Manchin was here, we aired the press conference on our show. I listened very carefully to what he said. One thing stuck out to me. He said the brand of the Keystone pipeline is probably gone. Do you agree?
Well, TC Energy, that was trying to build it over a decade, they've pulled out completely because it was vetoed twice after they spent $8 billion. But there are still some assets there. Both TC Energy and the government of Alberta are, frankly, suing the Biden administration through a NAFTA complaint for that veto, which we think was unlawful, and we think the damages are owed. But where there's a will, there's a way. And we believe that there is demonstrably a will in the United States to get access to more Canadian energy. Keystone would have delivered about 840,000 barrels a day reliably of responsibly produced Canadian energy, which could have more than made up for Russian imports that are now embargoed without the United States having to go cap in hand to Venezuela, Iran, and Saudi Arabia.
Has anyone from the White House conveyed to you, and I'm not talking about Joe Manchin, but anyone from the White House conveyed to you that there is an interest to see a higher level of production from Canada directed towards the United States? Because I was looking it up, trying to find out if I could see anyone. There's some anonymous sources cited, but the closest thing I could see was President Joe Biden's top economic advisor saying any action on Keystone wouldn't actually increase supply. So has anyone from the White House actually said to you they want more Canadian oil?
The answer is no, which we find inexplicable. I was in Houston about a month ago speaking to the world's largest energy conference, and while I was there talking about how Canada could get hundreds of thousands more barrels a day to U.S. markets, there was a story about White House advisors advising the president to go to Riyadh to ask the Saudi king to produce and ship more. And I would remind you that I would remind them that Saudi Arabia uses oil money to finance their military machine dropping barrel bombs on civilians in Yemen. We know that he's close to negotiating an end to Iranian oil, the Iranian oil embargo. Iran uses their oil money in part to finance the Syrian war machine that targets civilians in Syria. And now it's very open that the White House is pleading with Venezuela, or not pleading, but working with Venezuela to lift the embargo there. And that's a dictatorship that uses oil wealth again to oppress its people. The fact that they haven't bothered to pick up the phone and come virtually or physically to Calgary to ask us what we could do out of Alberta is hard to understand. We appreciate very much that Senator Manchin, the chairman of the Senate Energy Committee, though, has a different perspective.
Why haven't you and your government, Premier, been able to convince the administration otherwise?
Well, we don't have a direct line to the administration of foreign government. We have to work through the government of Canada. And the real question is, why hasn't Justin Trudeau picked up the phone and said that Canada can be a solution to the energy scarcity problem and the energy security problem that both the United States and Europe are facing? And I think that's partly because he was at best indifferent to Keystone XL. He canceled Northern Gateway, through additional regulatory mandates, effectively killed Energy East, has given a veto to Premier Legault over interprovincial pipelines, which in part has killed virtually Energy Saguenay, which could have delivered LNG to European markets. So we would plead with the federal government to get in the game here and be a voice for a North American energy alliance.
Respectfully, and I don't disagree, there are genuine questions for the federal government about the way in which they have, sold or not sold the product coming from Canada. But I have listened to the Prime Minister on a number of instances since this war broke out, talking about how Canada can do exactly what you just talked about. So is your characterization not wholly accurate?
Well, let me just put it this way. We got word a week before President Biden was sworn in January of last year that he intended to veto KXL on day one. We got that information from pro-pipeline, Democrat-affiliated unions in Washington with whom we have really good relations in Alberta. And we went to the Prime Minister. I specifically called him. I said, please contact President-elect Biden. That was the ask coming from pro-Keystone XL, pro-energy Democrats, and the call was never made. So I hope there's been a change of view in Ottawa, but we have not seen that reflected in any actions. The Russian invasion of Ukraine underscores that the world desperately needs more responsibly produced Canadian energy to compete with and displace conflict oil coming from many of the world's worst regimes. And if we made this a matter of national urgency, I believe we could get it done, both with respect to LNG and oil infrastructure, but it's going to require national leadership.
Premier, if in fact there is something like the Keystone resurrected under a different brand, do you rule out ever investing taxpayer money in something like that again?
No, I very much rule it in. And part of my discussions with Senator Manchin is perhaps the U.S. Congress taking the lead on an appropriations bill or some policy direction to de-risk a successor to KXL in the same way, to be fair, that the federal government has done with respect to the Trans Mountain expansion after Kinder Morgan backed out 4 years ago. So given all of the political and legal turmoil around apparently what used to be boring basic utility infrastructure of energy pipelines, perhaps governments do need to de-risk these projects, to go to the market to seek vendors in the amongst midstream companies to build a project like that. We would be prepared in principle to invest in that because it would be manifestly in the long-term economic interests of Alberta and Canada.
Respectfully though, you were certainly criticized when this decision came from Joe Biden, President Biden, because it was largely expected. It's not like he's made a secret of what he feels for pipelines or in specifically where Keystone is concerned. Is it not irresponsible to once again lose? I mean, you lost more than $1 billion of taxpayer dollars in this investment. Is it not irresponsible to lose that money again, potentially lose that money again?
Well, we made that investment in March of 2020 with TC Energy when now President Biden had not expressed an intention to veto KXL. And in fact, he didn't do so until a campaign staffer made a statement in June of that year. But we thought that clearly this was in the best interest of the United States. 77% of Americans in a recent poll say they support Keystone XL. At the end of the day, this would have resulted in about a $30 billion lift in royalties for Alberta.
But with respect,
all Canadians would benefit. That all Canadians would benefit from. Well, just as the government of Canada stepped in and took a risk with respect to its purchase of Trans Mountain because it's in the country's vital economic interests, and they're making a significant investment. I think in the long run it makes sense for Canada, but we're not going to give up on this, Vashi. We're not going to let foreign-funded special interests landlock Canadian energy while we have allowed Putin's Russia and OPEC to grow their share of global energy markets. Why in the world would a liberal democracy with amongst the highest human rights, labor, and environmental standards shut itself in from global energy markets, allowing people like Vladimir Putin and Nicolas Maduro effectively to profit from that? It's not in the interest of the environment or global peace and security.
And I certainly am not trying to take away from that point, and I think it's a salient point. I'm just saying, is it responsible to sink more taxpayer dollars into trying to make the point? But I do want to just move on because I only got you for a few more minutes. Sure. And I have to ask you about your leadership review. As I'm sure you understand, we have a big political audience and they're interested in it. I read a quote from you where you said the threshold for staying on as leader is 50% plus one. If you actually reach that low of a bar, will you stay on?
Well, I said that in a democracy, a majority is 50% plus one, and that's true in our Constitution for a leadership election. But I'm confident, Vashi, that I'll be getting a strong endorsement from grassroots United Conservative members as they vote over the next few weeks by mail ballot. What I'm hearing is people are optimistic. We've turned the corner past COVID. We're leading Canada in economic growth. Our government has delivered on 90% of our election commitments. The economy is diversifying, and there is a number of people that want to continue fighting over vaccines and COVID. Most of us, though, want to move on united into the future, and I think that will be reflected in this vote.
You surely don't characterize, though, 50% plus one as a strong endorsement, do you?
No, I said that's a majority in a democracy. It is. I'm expecting an endorsement from our members. I don't know what the number will be, but everything I hear and all indications are very encouraging. But at the end of the day, Vashi, I'll accept the judgment of our members. If they decide they want to go into a leadership election, I will completely respect that. But if they endorse my leadership and stability, continuity, and unity in our party, I fully expect all members of our caucus to do the same.
I guess I'm trying to understand, because I'm trying to understand exactly what you mean. You're saying it's 50% plus one is a majority, but you expect a strong endorsement, and you know that 50% plus one is not a strong endorsement. At what point do you say? I don't have a crystal. I'm just asking. I honestly just asking. At what point do you say I'm going to leave? And you're not the first politician to face this. I was looking through examples. Ralph Klein, 55% in 2006. Joe Clark, 66% in 1983 wasn't enough. What is enough for you to stay?
Well, once again, the majority in our Constitution for my party and in democratic tradition is 50% plus one. I'm expecting an endorsement. I don't know what the number will be, but I will certainly respect the decision of our members. And if they decide that we want to have a leadership election, I think it would be very divisive. It would mostly be fought over a retrospective argument about COVID policy and things like vaccines, when I think most Albertans want a government focused on jobs, the economy, pipelines, on the cost of living, on inflation. This government just eliminated the provincial fuel tax. Those are the kinds of things I think Albertans want us focused on, not internal division. We went through a decade of division as Alberta Conservatives between 2005 and 2015. It handed government to the NDP, and most Alberta Conservatives don't want to repeat that kind of division.
It's on that point that's so interesting to me, though, because over the weekend you made the exact, case to your party members that essentially not voting for you would create disunity and would hand Rachel Notley another victory. But if 50%, just half the people, just a little bit over half of the members vote for you, that's not really a unified result, right?
Well, you're never going to get 100%. I suspect that there will be a handful of people who want to continue to grind axes over COVID policy in Alberta, who will be dissatisfied if I were to get 95%. So there's no magic number, Vashi. I'm just doing my best to give a clear direction to our government, our party. I am, after all, the person who played the central role in reuniting divided Alberta Conservatives and winning the largest ever Democratic mandate in Alberta history, the first government ever to win over 1 million votes. I've led a government that, even through massive historic crises, has implemented 90% of our platform commitments and is now leading Canada in economic growth. That's the record I offer to our members. They'll make the decision. I'll respect it, whatever it is.
If you were confident, though, that you would have a result that kept you in this position, wouldn't you pinpoint a number?
Vashi, I'm pretty sure if you go back and look at all of the leadership reviews in Canadian political history, no one in my position came up with an arbitrary number. I'm looking forward to what I believe will be an endorsement of my leadership, of unity and stability in our party. I think most Alberta Conservatives don't want to drive us into the ditch of division just 13 months before the next general election.
Premier, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Vashi.
That's Alberta's Premier Jason Kenney. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.